just your netway books this month. God help me lifting these. Hey folks, I had a fantastic reading month in November, as you can see by this giant stack. So let's quickly blast through the statistics and then get into each of the books that I read. 5,014 pages, very happy with that, across 17 books. I only listened to 24.74 hours of audiobook this month, so 25 hours of audiobook, barely anything at all. Was just not happening this month. The biggest book that I read was Iron and Embers, coming in at 520 pages. This one. And the oldest book I read was The Two Towers, which was from 1954. Both of them are huge and read. Nice. I'm very glad that I managed to read 6 non-fiction books in non-fiction November, as well as reading 1 crime book, 1 mythology-based book, 5 fantasy books, a dystopian, and 2 poetry books. For the nationalities, I read from 8 English authors and 1 British author, so 9 from the UK in total, very pleased. I read from 2 American authors, 1 French, 3 Australian, 1 Kenyan and 1 Uruguayan. And for the format, there were 2 ebooks, 7 paperbacks, 6 hardbacks, 1 audio and 1 mixed format. So those are the stats. Let's get into the books. The very first book I read this month was How to Get Onto the Property Ladder, which is a non-fiction I have via ebook. I am hoping to buy a house at some point in 2025. I don't know if we'll actually manage it, but it is an aim. I think this is a really good book. It's very UK based, won't work for anyone anywhere else. Also is primarily English. There are some quite big discrepancies between buying a house in England and Scotland, as my family very well know. So yes, there's some big discrepancies, so it's very English and Welsh based, but if you are in that category, this is a good book to pick up. Next up, I read The Chase by Ava Glass. This is a super fast crime read, and we are following a young woman who has joined the British Secret Service, and she's having to try and save a man who has a Russian heritage and is being kept safe by the Brits for the details that they've given on the Russians, but he does not want to be saved and they have to get across London without dying. I really enjoyed this. I found it really engaging. I blasted through it, and I am looking forward to hopefully picking up more books in the series. Then next up was The Science of Racism by Keon West. This is an arc that was kindly sent to me by the wonderful folks over at Book Break and is coming out in January 2025, so keep an eye out for this one next month. This is really well done. It's exactly what it says on the tin. It is using scientific analysis of studies and meta-studies to determine whether racism is prevalent in an environment and how it is impacting people. With Keon West themselves being black and British, it does focus primarily on black British racism issues. There are also mentions of racism in the US, as of course this is a very large data study in the English speaking language, and it does also mention various different races, but that is the predominant feature. There are loads of references and notes and sources in the back, so you can go and check them all out yourself, which West encourages you to do, and everything is broken down very well. My only issue was that there was some repetitiveness in this. A few of the studies were mentioned multiple times to make the same point. I understand that West was trying to hammer the point home, but instead of feeling instructive, it felt like you're not paying attention. So that was my only issue with it. Regardless, I still do think that you should pick this up because the studies in here are really useful to know about and also quite interesting to learn about the various different studies that have occurred. So good evidence when you try and argue with idiot racists. Sticking on the non-fiction theme for now, and I read Forces of Nature, The Women Who Changed Science by Leila, McNeil and Anna Reza. I really enjoyed this one. It is women from across the centuries. Oh, there's my bookmark. There's a couple of ones from antiquity across all different nations across the world and the impact that they had. Of course, there will be women who've been left out of this just because we don't know about them yet. I did have an issue with, there was a chapter where it mentioned eugenics, and I would have rather they denounced it a bit louder. No one likes eugenics, okay? So that was my only issue with this one, but I really enjoyed learning a lot more about so many amazing women that have had a huge impact on science and are often just pushed to the bottom of the barrel because no one cares, including many women that should have won Nobel Prizes and men took their claims instead. Switching to a fantasy read, I read this one via audiobook, and that is A Winter's Promise by Christelle Dabos. I really enjoyed this one. It is very slow. So reading it via audiobook was a really good option for me because it meant that I was able to have it on in the background and have the story progress as I was working, which is what I do with my audiobooks. But it is a very, very slow read, and I imagine that could be quite off-putting if you're reading it physically, so I would recommend the audiobook for this one. We follow a young woman who is in this fantastic world where people have magical powers, and she is very much like the nerdy little librarian, and she doesn't care about getting married or anything, but she is married off to a man from this other world in this magical realm, and it is freezing cold up there, think like inspired by Russia. She's thrust into this environment and it's dangerous, she might die, everyone's very manipulative and never means what they say, and she is trying to survive through this. I am definitely intending to carry on with the rest of the series. Then my Discworld read for the month. This is the one before Hogfather. I'm so excited that I am finally getting to read Hogfather in December. But anyway, Feet of Clay. This is a city watch book. It deals with racism, it deals with enslavement, and I think that it handles them all quite interestingly, and I really enjoy the topics and the discussions that were had here. Instead of having an actual race of a recognisable living creature, instead Pratchett uses living clay, essentially, so that it is entirely separated and it is easier for people who have not been oppressed to see themselves in this creature, rather than trying to have to actually relate to another human. So difficult. But yeah, I think this is done really well. As always, I really enjoyed Discworld. Going back to some non-fiction, I have Dragon's Teeth and Thunderstones by Ken McNamara, and this is all about the mythology and the folklore that has been built up around fossils over the centuries, and how this has integrated these fossils into society. So for example, Thunderstones would be put on windowsills to keep homes safe from gods of thunder, as an example. It was really interesting to see the mix of these fossils and their usage. You know, they were often like attached to clothing, made into bracelets and into jewellery. Seeing how these pieces of fossils and these ancient creatures were so important to ancient societies, primarily in Europe is the focus of this one, was really, really fascinating and very interesting to read about. If you're at all interested in fossils, I do really recommend this one. It was a fascinating read. And then a very different kind of non-fiction. This is a biography of Alvin Karpis called On the Rock, with his story being told to Robert Livesey. Of his time on Alcatraz, he was one of public enemy #1s in the US, and this is his time just in Alcatraz, not anywhere else. It does give you a little bit of background so that you have the context for his life story. And I think that I can sum this up best with extracts from the final paragraph. So this was as he was leaving Alcatraz and being moved to a new prison. "If I could at this moment escape successfully, I would still kill anyone in my path. The rules, the regulations, the routine of Alcatraz have done nothing to reform me. Reform awaits me, although I don't realise it at this moment, on McNeil Island with my friend Warden Madigan." So he spends 25 years-ish on Alcatraz, and all it does is beat him down and also give him new methods of escaping, of bothering prison guards, like getting new contacts in the outside world. He doesn't reform until he is removed from this extreme environment and is put in with a warden that actually understands that these people are human and are not just dogs to be treated awfully. And I think that really sums up the prison system used in the majority of the world. Not every country, but most of them, including the UK. It is really fascinating to kind of learn more about how Alcatraz functioned, and learning about some of the escape attempts and how they worked and how the work environment functioned, because these inmates were made to do jobs. It's a really, really interesting read, and one that I wouldn't have picked up if Annie hadn't given this to me, so I'm very grateful that she pushed this one in my direction, because it was very, very interesting. Then back to fiction, and I read Mindbreaker by Kate Dillon, which is the second and final book in this duology. I really enjoyed this. So it's from a completely different point of view from the first book in the duology, but it really does allow you to see the progression of the characters from the first book, where they go from here, and also more aspects of this dystopian world. Computer technology has been embedded into humanity, and how this impacts, of course there are some rich people who just think that they're getting to live these great lives with all this technology imbued in them. There are also people on the outskirts who don't get any of this technology and live in poverty. And then there's also the people where they are embedded with this for the usage of others and how this impacts them. This is brilliantly written, absolutely blasted through this, had a fantastic time. Could not recommend this duology enough. Also, this edition is really pretty, which just makes me happy. You know, it's the little things. It's the little things. Back to some non-fiction again. Like I said, I was very pleased with how much non-fiction I managed to read this month, because I read it much slower than I read fiction. So I am astounded at the amount I managed to read. Fire and Ice by Natalie Starkey is one that was gifted to me by the wonderful Carrie from Caring for Books, where she annotated it with all of her thoughts and some questions. If you can see all of these tabs up here and down here, I tried not to get them on the actual text, are times where Carrie all had questions. And at some point, when I have the time, I'm going to go back through all of her questions and send her a big Word document that's just answering them all. If you don't know, this is kind of what I did my masters on. Not really solar system volcanoes, but volcanoes. And this was so interesting to read, because whilst I did look a little bit at extraterrestrial volcanoes when I was doing my research, it wasn't something that I focused on. I was really focused on Etna and on Vesuvius. So I found it fascinating to learn more about the volcanoes that we have across our solar system, across the various different planets and moons, and I learned some really interesting little factoids. And I'm also quite excited to sit and go through and answer Carrie's questions. Some of them are questions that, like, I hadn't thought of, just because I'm so used to this sort of stuff, whereas for Carrie, who is a lawyer, by the way, so much more intelligent than me, but a little bit less familiar with volcanoes, comes across like some very different questions, and I'm really curious about going through all of them and seeing if I know the answer already or if I need to look it up. So this was a great time. I really enjoyed it. If you care about volcanoes or about space or think that the combination is cool, recommend. It also talks about the possibility of life on other planets, because volcanism is one of the big impacts that were on planet Earth that allowed us to have life, with the current theories of where life begun being primarily around geothermal vents, which of course are related to volcanism. So I'd recommend if you're at all interested in that. And then, sticking more to planet Earth, we have The Secret World of Weather by Tristan Gooley. I did try and listen to this one on audiobook and then realised that I wanted to focus on it and really absorb it, so I read it physically instead. And this is a mixture of lecturing you for not caring enough about your environment, and also just kind of telling you some interesting stuff, but then also, the bit that I really liked is it was telling you how to identify little things in your own environment that can help you predict the weather. For example, the weather report might tell you that there is a 40% chance of rain over the next 2 hours. But actually being able to look at the cloud cover in your area and look at the types of clouds and the direction that they're moving in, you're actually more likely to be able to predict when it's going to rain or if it's going to rain in your exact location, because of course they're just doing it over a large span, even in the UK, where we are a much smaller island. And so you can actually predict this much more directly. And like, take your laundry in time, for example, or get out of the rain and nip into a pub when you're out shopping. Lots of different aspects of just reading the weather in the world around you and being able to use that day to day. So I found this one really interesting. I think I'm going to have to go back and reread it at some point, just to try and like go into specific sections to try and embed learning about like cloud patterns and things like that. I never did get to learn about the weather in my geography classes because we were supposed to do it as a module, and my teacher didn't like the weather stuff, so we just didn't learn it. Then to something a little bit different for me, which is some poetry. I read Teaching My Mother How to Give Birth by Warsan Shire. This one was gifted to me for my birthday by Olivia Savannah, thank you so much. And this was such an interesting read. They were born in Kenya and raised in Somalia and now live in the UK. And this is about lots of things from their culture and about being a woman in their culture, additionally about immigration, about coming to the UK, coming to Europe in general, and how you are treated there with the racism and the sexism combined, and then also the intricate friendships that people can have. I thought this was really interesting. I don't read a lot of poetry, and I'm glad that my Read Around the World challenge, because this is either for Kenya or Somalia, I think I'm putting it for Kenya, but I'm not sure which, I'm really glad that it's exposing me to a lot more interesting books, so this was another one that I'm very glad I picked up. Then Book Break invited me to a buddy read with loads of wonderful people of Iron and Embers by Helen Scheuerer. This one is a romantasy. I'm reading more of these lately, and I'm discovering that if there is enough fantasy plot, then I'm fine with the romance. This one is a slow burn, and that is my preference because I don't really care about the romance. In the actual chat, I'm like pointing, because I was reading ahead of it because I was really enjoying the plot of the book, and so in the chat I'm like, you guys are gonna love chapter 54, just wait, and they're like, yes, alright. I'm like, yeah, it was fine. That was the sex scene. I'm like, I don't care, man, but you lot enjoy. If you can deal with those, if you're fine with having that within the book, this is so fascinating for the plot. So it is actually a spin-off series for a series that I've never read before, but that didn't impact me at all. There are some flashback moments in here to give you a little bit more context if you haven't read the first series, or reminders if you have. And it is this fantastical world, and our main character is technically heir to the throne, but the throne no longer exists because there was a war previously, and so there is no kingdom to inherit. And she has been poisoning people who have ruined her kingdom, and she then goes to a alchemy school, and whilst she is wanting to be in this school to learn more alchemy to be able to kill more of the people that took down her kingdom and murdered her friends and her family, she then also learns a lot more, discovers some friendships. It's really good. I really enjoyed the kind of magical political aspect of this one. I really want to continue. The end made me so angry. Damn you, Helen. Damn you. And I definitely want to continue. I want to read more from this series. So yeah, this was so good, and the chapters are ridiculously short. They're like anywhere from 2 to 10 pages, which helped me absolutely blast through this. Something else that is technically romance heavy, this one is mythology instead, Greek mythology, and that is The Palace of Eros by Caro de Robertis, as I hit myself in the head with it. This one I was really hesitant about. I only said yes to it from Goldsborough because I couldn't skip any more books. I have not read much of the Greek mythology retellings or anything based on them. The only one I think I've read it before this one is Piranesi, which of course doesn't have any romance in it, but I really enjoyed that one. I gave it 5 stars. And I was hesitant about this one. And again, if you can deal with romance, this one is fine. There is romance in here, it's interesting to see, but more interesting to me was the aspect of seeing these Greek gods and goddesses react to the stimulus in their environment and react to what's happening around them, and talking about humanity and how people are impacted by different actions, and talking about feminism, what it is to be a woman, what it is to be transgender, what it is to have no gender and to be non-binary. I think this was just really well done, and I think I need to read more Greek mythology stuff. I've been putting it off because everyone's so into it, they're so hyped, and I had never really gotten into it. So I just didn't really bother. God damn it, I think I need to. Okay, we're coming up on the end now. This one is of course representative of one of 3 books because I read The Two Towers by J.R.R. Tolkien. Very happy. As of filming, I have started The Return of the King. I am so excited that by the end of this year I'm going to have read Lord of the Rings finally. I adore this series so much. I can't believe it took me so long to get to. I do think that I enjoyed Fellowship more than Two Towers. That does not mean I didn't enjoy Two Towers. Fellowship was just perfection, and Two Towers I just really enjoyed. If you haven't read them, I hadn't until now, so no judgment. I don't want to spoil anything for you, but I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed seeing Sam and Frodo's relationship progress, as well as seeing Merry and Pippin and how their experiences were being navigated and what they were learning about. And it's just so good. It's just so good. Also, you should all know that my favourite book series is The Books of Pellinor by Alison Croghan, and I always knew, because she said, that she was inspired by The Lord of the Rings. It's just so interesting to see these aspects that I know so well and are so integral to my reading personality and are so important for me, and to see where they came from, where they were inspired by, the little nuggets that she took and evolved into her own ideas, and it's so interesting to have them both in my brain. Oh, mwah. Perfection. More poetry, very unusual for me. This one is Love Sonnets of Shakespeare, obviously by William Shakespeare, from the Running Press Minis. So this is a collection of not all of his sonnets, but a large number of them. There are 80 of Shakespeare's sonnets in here. I read through them all. I enjoyed some more than others. I prefer the ones that have his lyricism and the tonal impact on them. And there are a few that I'd studied in school that brought back some good memories and enjoyment of studying them and leaning more into them. I find it so fascinating that Shakespeare has been so heavily translated, because his work, both in his plays and in his poems, relies so heavily on this iambic pentameter that only really works in English. And so I find it fascinating that it has been translated into so many other languages and enjoyed in so many other languages. Curious. And then on the name of Pellinor, I decided that I was going to read, finally, The Friendship by Alison Croghan, which is a very short ebook. I think it's about 25 pages, that is set when Salomon, if you know the series, first goes to Norlock. If you don't know the series, before the start of the series, when one of the side characters meets one of the main characters. There you go. I love this. I love anything in that world. It's so nice to get like an extra addition to the world, like an extra little nugget. And of course, given that I've just been reading Lord of the Rings and feeling really Pellinor-y from that, it was really enjoyable to see the influences and how those crossed together. So very short, but if you've read and enjoyed any of the books of Pellinor, even if it's just the first one, the gift slash the naming, depending on what country you're in, recommend. And that is my November TBR. It is fucking huge. I don't really want to lift them up again. I did it for the thumbnail at the start of the video, and they're all stacked here now, and yeah, I have 15 books here, including Lord of the Rings, so I don't really want to lift them again. But I had a fantastic reading month. Please do let me know down in the comments below, did you read any non-fiction for non-fiction November? And if you did, what did you read? Did you enjoy it? I am always looking for more non-fiction recommendations. I have definitely depleted my non-fiction stack. I say depleted. It is still about this high, but I've depleted my non-fiction stack, so I am always happy to add some more into that, especially because I will not be on a book buying ban next year. I probably won't be buying many books anyway, but I can, and so I am excited. Thank you so much for watching, folks. If you'd like to see what I'm planning to read in December, then the video is up there for you, and I hopefully will see you in the next one. Bye!